the first virtual class of our new physical year since we follow the states. So we're July to June. So I want to make sure that everyone gets in here. Perfect. All right. So as people are coming in, my name is Taylor Fox. I'm with Tennessee Wildlife Federation. I'm the Middle Tennessee field rep here in the Nashville office. And tonight we're going to talk about kayak fishing. The point of tonight's class, we're going to talk about the benefits of fishing with a kayak. So all of us here are probably fishers if we've come and we're wondering if we want to explore the world of buying a kayak or getting into maybe some ponds that don't allow motors, or maybe you just want to save gas at the rising prices that it's at. But the components and different types of fishing kayaks. So you will see, just like every other hobby and sport, there are everything to fit your needs, and some new models even came out today we'll talk about. And then how using safety is important in a kayak, just as it is with a big boat, but they're a little different than a big boat or something with a larger motor. And then lastly, investing in a new fishing kayak, some things you might want to think about, maybe some things you didn't think about before, maybe you want to think about before you go to the store and do some research online. But why fish in a kayak? Well, there are several reasons. Jefferson says he doesn't know anything about hunting or fishing. Where do I start? Well, you're in the right spot. We're going to learn about fishing here tonight out of a kayak, and I'll give you a little sneak peek. At the end, you can sign up for trot line and jug fishing, the next virtual class taught by Chris Hearn, our West Tennessee field rep, on the 25th of this month. But one of the reasons why I like to kayak fish is it's the best way to access bodies of water that cannot be accessed or reached by motorized boat. So a lot of your ponds that hold the big fish in the back, they're holding big fish and they're growing because they're not getting lures thrown at them all the time, right? So maybe like your HOA pond, or maybe there's a pay lake that'll allow you to use a non-motorized boat, or maybe a personal watercraft only that a kayak could easily enter and you could fish out of it, versus you couldn't put your bass boat or your John boat in there because it runs on gas, not batteries. So there are a lot of different ways and a lot of different reasons why people kayak fish. I think a lot of people transitioned into kayak fishing and made it popular in the last couple of years because they had kayaks for, just paddle sport and leisure with the family. And then when COVID happened, they were like, oh, I can take this out and go fishing and get to a lot more spots than I can on the bank. So here where I live in Hendersonville, I see kayaks and canoes on top of people's cars every day, year round. So any canoes or kayaks is sort of synonymous, but tonight we're going to focus mainly on kayaks. All right. What are some pros to a kayak? All right, it's affordability. I say that very loosely because you can get into a cheap kayak used off Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or somewhere, or from your local church or the co-op bulletin board. But you could also spend a pretty penny. One came out today I saw from Old Town, and it's going to be pushing $5,000 or $6,000. So affordability is it's a really loose term I'm using here tonight, but it's a lot cheaper than a bass boat for the most part. Accessibility, we sort of already touched on, but getting back into those shallow creeks, maybe that you can't access with a boat, or maybe there's just not a boat ramp close by, so you can get in with a kayak with a launch from the grass or from the side, which you can't do with a big boat. Very versatile. How do you want to fish it? You can fish it deep. A lot of people will fish kayaks on the ocean or on the Outer Banks. I know we don't think about that here much in Middle Tennessee, but very versatile watercrafts. You can use from family fun all the way to fishing by yourself or fishing kayak tournaments if you get involved in it. Portability, you don't have to have a truck. You don't have to have a trailer. You can put it on top of your SUV, whether that be large or small, or if you're close enough, you can stick it in the back of your car and let it hang out with a flag and then drag it to the creek when you get there. But tons of different ways to get it to the water. Leads to the next point, travel friendly. Like I sort of talked about, you can travel all across and not have to worry about towing a trailer and busting a tire or carrying a spare or taking it on vacation because it's relatively lightweight, most of them, and doesn't require much extra equipment other than some ratchet straps and maybe some bone blocks to keep it on top of your car. And that last one I threw in there, improved perspective, because you can sort of get a better idea of what the fish are doing when you're in a kayak because you're closer to the water. You have to sort of be more in tune because you have less space. So you're thinking about it a lot more, like what you're throwing, maybe the color of the water, the temperature of the water, because you're probably going to be getting a little wet when you get in the water with a kayak. All right, now to every good thing, there's also some bad things. Sometimes cramped. I'm a big guy. You have to have a big kayak, or you have to plan accordingly. You can't do like these guys fishing Major League Fishing and have 15 rods on the deck rigged up with everything different and trying to be professional. You got to remember that sometimes space is limited. Like that picture there, you can still put a lot on there, but just remember that sometimes space gets cramped, and if you're sitting in a sitting position versus a standing position, fatigue could be different. I mentioned it before, but you're going to get wet. These kayaks have scupper holes to keep balance, and depending on if you have an inflatable kayak or a plastic kayak or maybe a hybrid kayak, you might get wet. Most of the time, launching and pulling out, you're going to get wet regardless, just because the way and the nature you have to get out of the watercraft into the water, but not necessarily. It is a little more physical work. You can back a boat in and just turn the motor on and back up, but kayak, you gotta either get it off the top of the truck or get it off the top of your car and actually physically handle that kayak, which could be a couple 100 pounds or all the way down to under 100. But it is a little more work, and then less protection from the elements. That is a big one that people don't think about. They think because they have a kayak, if the sun's out, they can go fishing. A lot of times the wind is the biggest component in my mind that might hinder you from kayak fishing, because if you're getting pushed off the lake or you're getting pushed into the bank and possibly not being able to turn into those waves, you could flip real easy, and you don't want to do that. Not because you can't swim, hopefully, or you're not wearing your PFD. Hopefully it's because you don't want to lose all your stuff. You don't want to get all your valuables wet if you don't have a dry bag or something like that. So just less protection from the elements. Remember that if you leave now, that the wind is a big key factor when you're kayak fishing. But sort of what I touched on earlier, but an entry-level kayak could be anywhere, fishing specific, fishing, hunting specific, $500 to $1,500. Now they're a lot more expensive. What we talked about, you can get up in $3, $4, $5, $6, $7+ thousand kayaks. But for most people, you can find one used for under $500 on Facebook Marketplace. And if you're looking to buy new, you're at that $300 to $800 ballpark if you're going to Academy or something that you're getting specifically for fishing. But a John boat, duck hunting boat, you can get them all day on Marketplace for cheap, but maybe they're not as cheap as a kayak. So if you want to buy a new one, though, you're looking probably around that 10,000 mark, maybe down to 5 or 6, depending on how big a motor you want and the trailer you get, if it's aluminum or, galvanized, all this fancy stuff. And then all the way up to a bass boat, which we grew up seeing on ESPN, or we watched, now Major League Fishing or Bassmasters. So the biggest things to say is before you go looking for one, I would say, I know your budget. If you know that you don't want to spend so much money, you just take out all the fancy features and you want to go bare bones, sort of like buying a car, just know before you go, because you don't want to go in and see all these fancy things and then realize that you don't have enough money for it. That can be done by identifying your needs. What type of fishing are you going to do? Do you need the accessories, or can you use a milk crate or a tackle box you already have? Don't skip on comfort. The chairs are important on those things. You think about the comfort level of the chair is what you're going to be sitting in the entire time you're fishing most of the time, unless it's a standing able kayak, which some of them are. Some of them are larger. Some have dual holes. So, but all in all, prioritize safety. Remember, again, make sure that if you buy a kayak, you can afford to buy a correct life jacket for yourself or your family, and that you can afford to get a good paddle, or have a backup paddle, an extra life jacket in case you have a friend come along, or if you have a tandem kayak and you can have your friends, family, significant others go fishing with you. But sort of what we touched on, just to give you picture examples, ease of transport. You don't have to have a super huge truck or a big trailer and all this stuff to get it to the water. You can store these most of the time in anyone's house, whether it be in your garage, whether it be in your bonus room. There are all different types of ways to store them. You can just leave them outside as well. So I know that plenty of people, if you drive down through the Harpeth area, Harpeth River in West Nashville, into Bellevue, towards Pegram, you'll see if you drive down Highway 70, all those places leave out canoes and kayaks year round, and they're still durable. They still work. Maybe the sun fades them a little bit, but they're still great. So you don't have to have a great space to store them. Don't take up much room. But sort of what I mentioned before, though, shallow water versus deep water, right? Kayaks are very versatile. Here where I am in Middle Tennessee, there's all types of creeks you can put a kayak in at. And even if you say you're a little heavier and you're dragging the bottom, you can get out and drag it and get to a deeper pool and keep on kayak fishing. Or you can go out to the middle of Old Hickory Lake if you want to, as long as you watch out for the barges and the bass boats and the skiers, and go fishing. So shallow water or deep water, versatility. All right, now kayak links. So this is maybe a slide you want to take a picture of, but they're all different types of kayaks. Obviously, we got whitewater, recreation, sit-in, sit-on top, fishing tandem, and ocean surf, right? So they're all designed for a different type of fishing or a different type of recreation. But depending on what you want, might depend on your length. So all fishing kayaks that I've found are anywhere from 10 to 16. Now, they do depend on model. You can get a little smaller one, but you might not have as many features. But this is sort of a general rule of thumb about kayak lengths. The shorter it is, the more control on left to right you'll have, but the more work you'll have to do to paddle forward, because you see on that whitewater kayak, that nose is a little wider for stability, but it's also not as easily to glide. That's why that ocean surf kayak is real narrow, because it's trying to fight bigger waves and bigger oceans, so it's narrow, so it's easier. As you paddle, you're getting more effort. Exerting more effort, you're getting more power out of it. So all these different things to think about. When we look at the fishing kayaks, we went from, here, I'm looking at this fishing tandem kayak here in the middle. But as you go to a single fishing kayak, a little different. Here are some of the features you might want to think about and maybe make a short list of what you want before you go and price one out and try and buy one, right? So do you want a carry handle on the front or the back, or do you want a rope? Do you want it to be roto-molded plastic to where it's in the thing and it cannot break unless you drop it multiple times? Do you want a dry hatch built into your kayak, or do you just want to get a dry bag and it's a little cheaper? I will say that is a little bit of a pricey addition overall. If you look at the kayaks for fishing, if it has a dry hatch built in, usually that seal has to be extra. The lid itself is a little more expensive. So that's something to think about. Those holes you see, the scupper plugs, is where water comes in to keep your stability in the kayak. So if you're fishing and the wind starts picking up, you're going to feel some water come splashing up through there. It's not a big deal. It's just helping the kayak do its job. Rod holders, I would say rod holders on a fishing kayak would be one of your top accessories if you can only afford one, because with kayak fishing, you're doing a lot with your hands. You might be looking at your maps on your phone. You might be trying to change bait, right? You might be trying to change that lure up to get the big bass, or fish a little deeper, or add some weight, or if you go tree fishing, which none of us ever do, you might have to cut the line and retie on. So if you think about it, you'd only have two hands. So that extra fishing rod holder is a really invaluable accessory. But this one here has a dry hatch in the middle too as well. That's what that little screws and bolts are right in the center there, that circle. So maybe if you want to keep your phone in there or something a little fancier. Grab handles, because as you see here, these actually have a pedal drive. It's sort of black and white in the middle, right above the label paddle drive. You push those forward and back, and I'll show you here in a little bit how the different fins below move you instead of that actual paddle. The seat, like I remembered or mentioned, remember that seat, you might be sitting in it for hours at a time when you go fishing. Make sure you don't skip on comfort. A little trick, though, is if you get a throwable fishing or a throwable flotation device and you get that real comfortable, then you can add that underneath your seat to give you a little more cushion, or you can put it on top to give you a little more height to get a little more vision. So a little trick of the trade. But two-part paddle is typical. You can do a single-part paddle like a canoe, but it's a lot easier if you have a two-part paddle. A two-part paddle we'll talk about here in a minute, but it's just on the left and right, so it's dual-sided. If you want storage bungees, a rudder. So if you see the rudder steering there on the side, this one, he could be pedaling, holding on to one side, and then steering left or right with his rudder. So this is a little fancier kayak, probably 1,000 plus, maybe a little less if you get it used. But that storage area in the back is like a milk crate or something. So those bungees could hold down a milk crate with your extra tackle, or maybe hold down a cooler, or even a little oscillating bucket for your minnows, just depending on what you want. A drain plug, and this one, as you see, because sometimes water does get on the inside. Nothing's perfect. Sometimes if you leave it in the sun long enough, the condensation in there could possibly, if there's a little seal or a crack, so you might need to drain it out every once in a while. But that's not all of them. That's just some of them. So they're sort of the parts of a kayak. Now, we're talking about paddle, though. Paddles are important, but paddles aren't necessarily important to the boat as much as they are to the person, in my opinion. Now, this chart has both, and I will say that both are important. But if I had to only pick one axis to go off of, I would go by your height. And the reason why is if you have a really short paddle, you're going to have to, and you're a tall, big guy, you're going to have to paddle a lot more because your paddle's not reaching the water. You're not getting as much power out of that paddle as you need to. But there's a little chart you can take a picture of if you need to. Most of these, if you buy a kayak now, they come with a paddle or they have options. And so when you're buying that, you can easily measure it, or they'll measure you at the store, like Academy or something like that if you go, or Bass Pro Shop. This is more if you're buying used, or if you want to upgrade a paddle down the road, you can sort of know your measurements for what you need. Now, this is one of the more expensive kayaks. A Hobie is the brand on that, but it was one of the original ones that made the pedal drive. So sort of a better picture of what you see there above and below. So we're about to look at all the pedal drive systems, but here's this picture because you can see the top. It's not like a bicycle to where you're going in a circle. This is like a pedal car when you were a kid where you're just pushing forward and back and the pedal is coming back and forth. So as you do that, all these different types of fins, depending on, or even rudders and propellers can help you get through. But everything's a little different, copyrights and everything, you know. But the Hobie has one, as you see there, Mirage. So that slips down in through the hole. So we're going to go back through here, and there's a hole right here. We're going to look at a little better picture in a little bit. But this is removable on all these kayaks. None of these pedal drive systems we looked at are per se to where they can't be modified. But let me get the little laser pointer out. This right here is the pedal drive. And what that does is you can just pull it out vertically. Now you could change it as long as it's a comparable size, but that's where all these are going. So right here. So any of these different ones will fit down in their respective kayaks based on brand. But while we're looking at it, so the Hobie, Mirage Drive 180, GT, all these different bearings to where you get more power when you push or pull, or when you go around in a circle like a bike on some of them. But if you look here, the Flex Drive is by Jackson. So if you just look at the difference in the branding, it's all the same. It's just a different way of doing things and what your personal preferences are. All right, so now some people were thinking about, why do I have to pedal? Why can't I just use a trolling motor? And you can. You can very well use a trolling motor, real easy, take it off your other boat, or just buy them for sale. They sell them at your local Walmart, and that's a little transom mount saver right here that you see. It just screws right on there, and you take it off, and then you control it with the handle here. And that cord runs to a battery, which he's got stored behind him in one of those storage spots. But here's the importance about those rod holders, right? He's obviously doing something with some line, tying on something new. He's got it across his lap. Well, if he just used this rod holder right here, it wouldn't fall off in the water. He might not lose it. It's real easy to drop things and think to yourself, man, I really hope that floats. All right. Even to the fancier, if we look here, this has a trolling motor with a remote control, autopilot, motor guide on there. Now you're talking fancy now. Remember we talked that these can be cheap, or these can also be really expensive. So as you start adding all these accessories, remember, we're only going up in price. But here's a bow-mounted trolling motor. It is remote driven, and he has a fish finder in the middle and extra comfortable seat there. So you can see he also has a mount on the back, though. You see let me get the laser pointer out again. Right here. That's another transom mount. So on the back of the boat, is considered the transom. He can put another trolling motor back there, or he could put even a small outboard on some of the bigger ones. But all these different options can be customizable per your budget and what you want to do with it. But there are some budget-friendly options. I'm going to show you a couple that I have some experience with that you can make for very simple parts that you might have laying in your garage, or you can go to Home Depot. So if you currently have a trolling motor that is a hand-mounted, or like one you see here, hand-controlled, that could easily go down in a lot of those pedal drive holes just with some simple PVC pipe modification, and then a battery behind you or in the front compartment like seen here. One of the biggest things to remember, though, is to test stuff out before you go out all day, right? So if you mount one of these, make sure you can know your distance below the bottom of the hole, so you're not dragging it and messing it up, or you don't want to get stuck on something and spin you around and around in moving water or current. So make sure you test it. Preferably with a buddy or someone else close by, or at least let someone know what you're doing. So if you do test it and go in the water, or someone knows what you're doing with a new device or testing out something you've homemade or put together, so where if something bad does happen, they know where to look for you, send help. All right, now this leads us to one of the other questions we had in the beginning. Do you have to have a registered vessel in Tennessee if it's under paddle control? No. So if you're paddling that kayak with your two-sided paddle or your pedal drives, so those pedal drives that have no electronics, no motor, that's just pedal, just your feet, personal power, you do not have to have registration. So all the fees are when you purchase it, right? When you purchase it, that's the last you have to do until you break it or need a repair or want to put a fish finder on it. All those fees will come later, but you don't have to register your boat in Tennessee or your personal watercraft if it is human powered only. So this does require it for trolling motors or for the motors on that transom. So this boat right here you see requires registration. This boat you see requires registration. This boat you see, even though it's take on and off real easy, in Tennessee requires registration. You can sort of see it, I think, on the front of his, maybe a state plate, but all these do require registration. But all these do not, because they're human powered. So you're pedaling that kayak, and the kayak is only moving because of your force or the effort you exerted. There are some ways to do it. You do have to pay tax on it, so you'd have to get a bill of sale or show a receipt. And you can do that through the TWR website in your county clerk's office, but they are required to have valid registration. And you can buy 1 year, you can buy 3 years for a little cheaper. It's all just depending on what you want to do. And so a good note, though, is if you buy a kayak and you put a motor on it and it has numbers, and then you want to go sell it on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or to your neighbor, make sure you give that person a bill of sale. Because once a vessel is registered, you have to transfer ownership with a quick piece of paper from the state saying you transfer ownership to the other person. So that way, if they ever want to register it, they can. And if you don't do that, and then years down the road, that person wants to put a trolling motor on, it's really hard to get it registered. But sort of like we talked about here, what are some accessories you need? So as you see here on this one, I picked this great photo because of a couple of things. You don't have to use every accessory that you buy at once. But as you see here, he's got it set up to where these little ball mounts can be anything. So he can mount whatever else he has up here. He can mount other rod holders at these circle mounts, just like this is a ram mount just for recommendation on his fish finder. But he's got one on this side too. So all these little accessory rails are where you can mount things, and Ram sells all types of accessories, and I'm sure Amazon has a knockoff by now. This is a way you can make the kayak your kayak. Only thing I would note here is that, remember, if you're going to transport on top of a car and you put all these accessories on it and you're going to flip the kayak over, you don't want to scratch them all up or dent your car up. So make sure you think about the accessories and when you put them on. So if you get to the garage and you put all these accessories on, then you got to load it on top of the car. That might be a lot harder than just putting them in the trunk and waiting until you get to the launch. All right, here is a kayak specific, I guess it could be a canoe, but mainly a kayak specific box. So as you see here, it's got a cool dry hatch in the middle with multiple different layers. It's got rod holders. It fits right in the back. It's got an even weight. You can bungee it down. You can screw it down. Even come out like a tackle box. But the point of this slide is to talk about not just the crate, but that it has rod holders, that it has a kayak cart on it, an anchor, and a fish finder. Any of these can be used with your kayak. So if you have a bass boat now that you want to go take into the creeks or the rivers and get in those backwaters, you can do that. Here is a Garmin Striker 4. I have one like this, and I have it mounted on a little piece of plywood. And the reason why is I don't want to put a hole in my canoe and kayak. So what I've done is I put it on a board like that to where I can bungee it in, or put one of those little 3M Velcro attachments and place it in there just for the few months I want to use it in the spring, or if I'm going after brim in early May, or trying to go at nighttime and I don't need the fish finder for depth and I just want it for the daytime, right? All these different variables and facts come into play. But All these different accessories are available. The cool part about this one, though, if you look, this kayak, which is what we talked about at the beginning, has built-in rod holders on both sides, front and back. So this is I think a bona fide. But this kayak has them built in, so they don't take up extra space, or they're not in your elbow room or hand room. So that's just something to think about. But moving on, I see we have one question here. Do we have any other questions before we move on about accessories or length? Jim asked, what does the scupper plug do and how does it work? So they allow water to come in as maybe, so a lot of times they come into play if you're in rough water or if you're trying to stand up and catch that balance, right? So if you were to just stand on the edge of your kayak and try and push all your weight with that right side, you start taking on water, you could easily flip. But as you're standing on a kayak or kneeling on a kayak or entering the kayak or not, it's allowing that water to come in and sort of balance things out. So some of them, the larger kayaks, actually have scupper holes below your seat, and some of them even behind. So just depending on the model and what the manufacturer has made, but those scupper holes are made to keep you balanced, keep you safe, and not help you the water. Like if you think about a boat or a John boat or a bass boat, they have to have a bilge pump in them, because as water comes in the back over the motor, or if you catch waves or the rain, that water has to have somewhere to go. While on a boat that's sealed, like fiberglass or aluminum, or even a dinghy, you have a bilge pump to throw that water out with battery power. But on a personal watercraft, you don't have that. So a lot of those scupper holes will allow it to very easily just flow right out as it's going up and down. You'll sort of see, because of those channels, they have little channels in the kayaks at the bottom that sort of tunnel that water to those scupper holes. That was a good question, Jim. Thank you. All right, now we're going to talk about a little bit of safety. So as you see here, all these adults are going down next to this fisherman, and none of them have a life jacket on. Well, is that okay? Is that not okay? What can I do with my kids? You know, do I have to have a life jacket on? Do I not have to have a life jacket on? What happens if I have a motor on my kayak versus having a paddle? All these questions are extremely valid, and if you look only at TWA's website, sometimes it's a little confusing to differentiate between paddle sports versus, boats. But here is the simplest form I've seen. So an approved wearable life jacket for each person must be readily accessible. Throw cushions do not meet this requirement. So you don't have to wear your life jacket if you're over 13, but you have to have one that fits you. So you can't have a little tiny life jacket and then, be as big as I am and then try and get on a kayak and be like, oh, I have a life jacket, though. It's my son's. No, it has to properly fit you and be readily available. Now, this next one might contradict what a lot of you learned growing up, but life jackets must be on board, not attached by a line or a leash. So if you have a motor, you're thinking, well, why wouldn't I attach it? Because I don't want the motor to go off. Well, when you're on a personal watercraft versus a boat, the boat leash there with like a motor with an outboard is in case you get thrown off the boat to turn the boat off. Well, with these paddle crafts and these small motors on these little boats, if the boat was to flip or if it was to take on water, like if it was a canoe and sink, it could possibly drag you with it if you have that lanyard attached to your kayak so it doesn't flow off. So the easiest way to do it is to wear your life jacket. If you feel the need to, or you're around a lot of people, or maybe if you're in a new area and not sure, and then if you need to have it close, a lot of these kayaks have right underneath the seat, they have enough room to fold the life jacket up and slide it right underneath your seat so it's easy to grab if you were to take on water or flip or a boat not see or something like that and get in a collision. But person under 13 must wear a life jacket while underway. Drifting is considered underway. So the biggest point I have to say here is if you're the parent in a boat or you're the older sibling in a boat that can drive and you have a younger person under 13 in the boat in the middle, whether they're paddling or not, they have to have a life jacket on. And that's not just paddle crafts, that's all crafts. Anyone under the age of 13 has to have life jacket on anytime the boat's moving. Now, if you're anchored, that would count. You could take the life jacket off and swim around, but you have to have a life jacket on anytime you're underway. A paddle craft must be able to exhibit a white light or lantern after sunset and during times of restricted visibility. So that was one of the questions earlier. So if you didn't know, a white light anytime after sunset, before sunrise, and also that visibility is typically fog. So if you go out early in the morning you probably want to have your white light on just because the sun hasn't come up yet. Number one, it's a law. And number two, the limited visibility, especially if you know those bass boats are running, or if a barge can't see you, it wants to make sure that you're safe and that craft you're on is able to be visibly seen from a long distance away. Boater state registration card must be on board if a boat is propelled by a motor or a trolling motor. So that's what I talked about. This is a paddle sport law, so you paddling doesn't need it, but if you have a motor or a trolling motor, it goes on to say specifically in the law, trolling motor as well, you do have to have registration. Oh. A fishing license is required by all persons 13 years of older or attempting to take fish. Now, this is one caveat to that. If you go on free fishing day, which is designated by TWRA, you don't have to have a fishing license. So if you just want to try kayak fishing and you own a kayak, or you want to rent one or borrow one from somewhere, but you don't want to commit and don't want to take a fishing license, you can go on free fishing day. Do not litter. Of course, it's the same fines as if you are on a boat for there. You don't want to be in control or in possession of drugs or controlled substances while boating or paddling. Obviously, underage drinking, can't do that. There we go. Even paddle crafts are subject to inspection. So I put that on here because a lot of people think that if I'm in a canoe or kayak and there's no motor on it, TWRA can't stop you at the ramp or check for life jackets. Well, that's just simply not true. They can check you and make sure that you have the correct size life jackets on board, that you have enough. And so that's why a lot of times when you see the canoe rental places, they're trying to keep those life jackets with all the boats, because when someone takes a boat, they have to have life jackets, or otherwise they're liable. Navigation rules apply, and then, you know, that one on the right, that packable life jacket. I've never personally used one, the inflatables, but just to note, the inflatables have to be worn to be considered on. So you can't be buying the inflatable because it's more convenient and packable and then not wearing it when you're underway, even as an adult. So any of the pool style life jackets, to where you pull it and then a CO2 cartridge inflates it, you have to be wearing those to be considered in compliance. I'll get you the free fishing day here once I check out towards the end of class. I got to look it up. The hunting and fishing regulations just came out for this year. Last month, and so I got to check the day. The day this past year was June 10th on a Saturday. Usually it's a spring summer month, and so that free fishing day is every year with TWRA. All right, so which life jacket do you need? So some of you got this right, but I will tell you that there are many different types of life jackets, and this is not just Tennessee waters. This I pulled from the Coast Guard, so this is all across. But which one has the greatest buoyancy? A lot of you got it right. It is type 1 there on the left. If you look at type 1, it's got the neck collar. It's a little thicker, but it's the greatest required buoyancy and is designed to turn most unconscious persons in the water from face down position to vertical or slightly backwards position. This type 1 PFD provides the greatest protection to its wear and is most effective in all waters, not just lake water, creeks, or it's even in the ocean. So a lot of times if you see an infant life jacket, it'll have that back neck part that flaps sort of like what you're seeing on type 1. And that way, if you were to get knocked unconscious and fall out of the boat, not only will that keep you afloat, it'll also turn you over to where your mouth is facing up, and you can hopefully breathe or maintain your life or consciousness, depending on what the situation is. But type 1 is the most buoyant. Type 2 is a wearable device designed to turn its wear in a vertical or slightly backwards position in the water. Now, this is like most of those free ones, or I almost say cheap ones you see like at Walmart and Academy or Bass Pro Shop, to where that flap goes behind your head or your neck, and then there's nothing behind it. So it's like a over your head type, and then it's a one strap. And so that little flap could potentially do the same thing for an adult, but it's not as safe as a type 1. But all these could suffice, except for a throwable, as far as complying with Tennessee water. So you can't take a throwable device like type 4 and expect that to be your life jacket. But the turning action is not pronounced with type 1, and this device will not turn as many persons over the same conditions as type 1. Type 3 is a wearable device designed so that wearers can place themselves in a vertical or slightly backwards position. While type 3 has the same buoyancy as type 2, it has a little to no turning ability. The type 3 covers and comes in many different styles, colors, and sizes. Many are designed to be particularly useful when water skiing, sailing, hunting, fishing, or enjoying other water sports, including canoeing or paddling. Several of these types provide increased hypothermia protection too, as if you're in cold water. The biggest thing I would say about Type 3 is they're the most readily available. When you're walking through Academy or Walmart and you see them all hanging up with the designs, that's most likely a Type 3 because they're the most comfortable to wear in a lot of people's opinion. They don't get in the way. They're easy to keep inside a garage on a hanger or something and let your friends use them when they come over or whatnot. But that's the most common, especially like in water skiing and actually like recreational boating. But Type 4, moving on, is designed to be thrown to a person in the water and grasped, not held by the user until rescued. It is not designed to be worn. So a lot of times you might see people sticking their arms through them and playing with them at a pool, something like that, but they're not designed to be worn. These are most common in motorized boats and at like monitored pools. And the reason those are most common in motorized boats, because depending on the length of the craft and the motor, you could be required to have one on board as a throwable. So a lot of those are most required. Now, not that style there in the picture on Type 4, but the square ones that are a lot cheaper are the ones I was talking about. I like to keep on the kayak and canoe because they can make great seats as well. So you can put it underneath for a little more cushion, or you can put it on top if you want a little more height on your seat. Sort of like when you were a kid and put a phone book underneath you to see over the dinner table, or maybe if you're a little older, you might remember before they had seatbelts, you put the phone book underneath you so that way you could see out the window in the back seat of the car. But that's a ring buoy in Type 4. And then Type 5 is any PFD approved for restricted use. So this is what I was talking about. You have to wear approved flotation devices, which are partially or totally inflatable, must be worn to be accepted as illegal. So you can't have that in the dry hatch of your kayak and say, well, I have a PFD on board because you're not wearing it. So the biggest takeaway from this slide is Type 1 is the safest, most buoyant, and Type 4 does not count as a life jacket, only as the throwable, and Type 5 has to be worn to be considered in compliance. Any questions about paddling or kayaking or specifics in your area? Let me know. Becky, I see you raised your hand, but for me to answer your question, I can't like call on you. You have to just type in the chat. So if you type in the chat your question or what you'd like to contribute to the class, I can see it, but unfortunately I can't respond to raising your hand because the audio and video is turned off for webinars. But while Becky types her question, any other questions are more than welcome. And we're going to go back here and see if any of you paid attention or if you were watching TV. I don't know. But we'll share the results after this. So if you don't know the answer, don't worry. Still give it a try, and we'll go over them at the end here. Any questions you have about fishing in your area or where maybe you can locate, we can get it. And then also I'll get that free fishing day for you while I look it up here. Let's see. Go Outdoors is what we talked about earlier for TWRA, and they have all that on there in a PDF download of all the regulations. Let's see, 2023. Yeah, what I'm seeing is June 10th. I don't want to tell you, Jefferson, that is the end-all, end-all. I can email you tomorrow when I get back to my book at my desk, but I don't want to tell you this is the end-all, end-all because it might be a change or it might be the 11th. But what I'm seeing with a quick Google search on this class is June 10th again. Jeffrey asked, how do you find out if a creek or river is navigable? Don't like dams and waterfalls. Well, I would agree with you, Jeffrey, on the dams and waterfalls in a fishing kayak. A lot of recreational people get under there. If a creek or river is navigable, it depends on what jurisdiction it's in. I don't want to give you the end-all answer, but a lot of those are done through TWRA's GIS mapping. So you can type in the TWRA and their mapping and just type in where to fish or waterways or boat ramp launches, and they'll show up and you can see if it's navigable, because if it's listed as navigable and through TWRA or TVA, which is those maps combined. There's also a really easy app. I'll show you the TVA app. I don't know if you can see it on my phone. Let's see. That might not work. There's a TVA app, and it's a little blue logo, and it's Lake Info is the name of it. Sorry, I can't get it to show up on my camera with the background, but Lake Info by TVA, they have a really great waterway map and stuff on there. And then also, if you need to look, there's an app called Fish Brain, and that can identify fish and help you with lures and everything else. There's a free version and a paid version, like everything on the App Store. And so I use the free version. There's plenty of features on there, Jeffrey. And Steve asked, how can you find a place close to home for fishing? Website? Yeah, I can give you that website. We send an email out after every virtual class, and I'll make sure that link is in there to those maps I just talked about. But if you want a place to fish, TWA is a great website that's updated every year. It's the GIS mapping. If you go to Go Outdoors Tennessee, how you register for this class, and you find a place to fish, you can actually even do it on your app, Go Outdoors app. I'll tell you the exact steps so I don't lead you wrong. You go to the app, and then on the bottom of the app, there's a TWRI website. If you click the little hamburger, as these young kids are calling it, the hamburger, it'll take you right to the TWRI website on your phone, and then there's a where to fish button. Let me see if I can get that to show up. Right. Oh, no. Come on. Where to fish button right there. Sorry for the terrible quality. The background's throwing me off. There's a where to fish. So once you go to the app, you go to the hamburger, and then you go to TWR website, and then boating guide is there, and then where to fish. So right there, where to fish. There's a guy with a blue polo on, where to fish. So that's the best way to go, Steve. Teresa says, I think it would be a great idea to have fishing days more often. Any chance that may ever happen? Well, Teresa, if you don't work, you can fish every day. And if I didn't have to teach these classes and take kids outside, I would love to fish every day. But then you can't buy new poles, rods and lures and more live bait and new kayaks. So we do have some free fishing days. We do have 2 fishing workshops coming up, one in West Tennessee and one in Knoxville next week on Thursday and Saturday, to where those are workshops to where you get your hands on them and we teach you how to tie. I won't be doing one in Middle until a fly fishing in September, and we're doing that in Franklin because I'm about to be out for a little while because my wife and I are having another baby. But Teresa, that's where we do it. I got the app. Thanks, Jeffrey. I hope it works out. If you have any problems, let me know. And then, are there any classes that teach me to fish like in person? I just answered that and didn't mean to. There's 2 workshops, one next Thursday night in Knoxville, and then one next Saturday, I think, close to Jackson. But we'll go over these poll results real quick, and then we're going to share results. So you see here, select 2 of the following items that are required when kayak fishing. So if you're fishing, a little trick wordy question, you have to have a fishing license and a life jacket. So a couple people said fish finder, which isn't required, but I will say it's a quick and easy accessory to make your fishing more successful. You are planning to use a kayak with a trolling motor. Does it need to be registered? Yes, we all got that right. Awesome. You are planning to go kayak fishing after dusk and before dawn. What piece of gear would be required? White light? Almost everybody. I'm going to contribute those wrong answers to a couple people being distracted. They must have got an Instagram or Facebook notification. And then lastly, select the life jacket type that has the greatest buoyancy. Type 1. Try to switch those answers up and trick you, but y'all did good. Awesome. So any questions about those, you're more than welcome to ask or email me. Here's that next virtual class I'll do the laser pointer because I'm not sure if it's your left or right. But the next virtual class is trout line and jug fishing, and it's being taught Tuesday night, same time as this one, 6:30 on the 25th of July. Chris Hearn is going to teach about that. My counterpart in Jackson, Tennessee, West Tennessee. He has been trout line fishing and jug fishing probably since he was in a diaper, and he would love to teach you how to catch all types of fish with a trout line or jugs or noodles. If you see floating noodles in a lake close to you, somebody's got a line down. So any of those jug fishing ways. And then all these virtual classes are free. So if you feel like you want to donate or think you got something out of it, don't feel like you have to. Our website's always available for donations, one time or reoccurring. We're a nonprofit 501c3, so you can get a receipt and get a tax break on it as well. So if that interests you, there's a QR code, and then you can also do it on the website. That's all over. I mean, actual fishing in person, not like classroom. Yeah, so depending on the workshop, you'd have to ask Chris or Jeb. I don't know for sure. The one we're doing in September for fly fishing, we are going to do some fishing on a private pond. I'm giving you a little tidbit because you're here in the class with me. We are going to do some fly fishing in Franklin on a private pond. So we'll do some fly fishing and some casting lessons, and then we'll go ahead and fish in that pond and try and catch some brim or some smallmouth. So We do some fishing at some of the events, not all of them. Some of them are classroom based, like next Thursday, I think, is in UT Knoxville, classroom based on fishing basics. But all the social medias we have, if you want to see what our upcoming things are, the best place is the website. And when you go to the programs tab, you can drop down and see an actual calendar. Now we just redid the website. Notice all the cool green if you've been here before. We have themes and new colors on the website. So if you haven't checked it out, tnwf.org, and you can get all plugged in and even add to your calendar from all these events. We're trying to start the new year off for us with a bang and get started with the new colors and new virtual classes. So if you have any suggestions for virtual classes, feel free to shoot one of the field reps email and we can add it to the list. We have about 42 scheduled for this year, and they're almost all listed on the calendar. I know that our communications team is working hard to get all those inputted, but they all are planned out. Everything from fishing to hunting to we're doing habitat management at the beginning of August for forests and wetlands and grasslands. We have our forester on and our wetland specialists. So if you have some private land or maybe you want some free advice that's not on YouTube, maybe you can actually talk and ask questions specific to your property. We're going to do that class. We're also even going to talk about how to train your dog to find shed antlers off of deer. So anything you want, we're trying to get to you. So if you have any suggestions, just shoot it to us on an email or on all the emails. My phone number is listed at the bottom, so you can shoot me a text too. Feel free to shoot me a text and ask your questions, or if you have a specific body of water question, lake, let me know. I can do some research, or I might give you some personal pins and see if I can help you catch them. But if anybody have any more questions, we'll end tonight 3 minutes early. All right, sweet. Thank you so much. Yeah, no problem. Anything you need. I'll hang out for a minute or two and see if there's any questions, and then we'll end. And like I said, tomorrow or the next day, you should get an email with the recording and thank you. So awesome. Well, I hope you all have a good evening and a great rest of the week.